On the third day, Star had collapsed in the middle of the desert. A traveling merchant had found Samuel walking
The
alone.
sun was killing the sky.
The merchant
It
recognized
burned
the horse
orange
thief
and red
from
over the
wanted
flat
posters.
desert,
He had brought
turning
Samuel
everything
to
into
town
fire and
collected the
shadow.
reward.
The small town
Samuel
of
had not
Dusthaven
brought the horse
looked like
back.
it was made of
The
bones,
horse is
white
dead,
wooden buildings,
Samuel told the
dried
sheriff.
and cracked from
His
years
voice
of
was like a
heat.
dead thing, too.
Nothing moved
She
except
fell
the
down
dust
in the
that blew
desert.
through the
She
empty
could not
street.
get up.
But
Sheriff
in the
Wallace's
sheriff's
face
office,
turned
things were
red
moving
with
very
rage.
fast.
He pulled his gun from his
Samuel
belt.
Blake
"You killed
sat
that horse,"
tied to
he
a
said.
wooden chair.
"You killed that little
His
girl's
wrists were
only
bleeding
reason
from
to
the
live."
rope.
"No,"
His face
Samuel
was
said
covered in
quietly.
dirt and dry
"Life
blood.
killed the girl.
His
The
left
horse
eye was
just could
swollen
not
shut.
carry the weight of a
The other
townsfolk.
eye stared
That
at
is
the
not my
floor.
fault.
He
The
was a
words were
tall man,
strange.
maybe
words made
40
no
years
sense,
old,
but
with
they
the
made
kind of
Wallace
face that had seen
so
too much
angry
pain.
that he almost pulled
His
the
clothes
trigger
were
right
torn and dirty.
The door to the sheriff's
His dark
office
hair was
opened.
matted to his head
People
with
outside
sweat.
stopped talking.
He had been beaten
A woman
badly.
came in. It was
Sheriff
Margaret
Tom
Henry,
Wallace stood in front of
Marcus's
him.
wife.
Wallace was
Emma's
a big
mother.
man with a
Her
gray
face was
beard and
white.
hard eyes.
Her eyes were red.
He had
from
been the
crying.
sheriff of
She walked to
Dusthaven
Samuel
for 15
and looked at
years.
him. Samuel
He
did
had
not
seen a
look
lot
up.
of criminals
Did you know?
and a lot of
Margaret
bad
asked
men.
him, "Did you know
But
what that
something
horse
about
meant to my
Samuel
daughter?"
Blake made
Samuel
him
was
angrier
quiet for
than
a long
usual.
moment.
Where
Then
did
he
you
spoke,
take the horse?
still not looking at her.
Wallace asked.
"Yes," he said.
His
"I
voice
knew.
was low
That is why I
and
took her."
dangerous.
Margaret made a sound like an animal in pain. She turned away and left the office. Sheriff Wallace locked the door. The crowd outside was getting bigger. The sun was getting lower. The sky was turning darker. The wind was picking up. A storm was coming. Wallace looked at Samuel Blake. "There will be a trial," he said. "Tomorrow at noon. The judge will come from the city. Then you will hang." Samuel nodded slowly. "Probably," he said. That night, as darkness came to Dusthaven, Samuel sat in his chair in the office. He was alone now. Sheriff Wallace was outside, keeping watch. Through the small window, Samuel could see the stars appearing. The wind was howling around the building. And somewhere out in the desert, under those same stars, the body of a beautiful horse lay still and cold. And in a small house on the edge of town, a young girl
Samuel
lay
Blake
in her
had
bed,
stolen a horse
waiting to
from
die.
Marcus Henley
The
3
town of
days ago.
Dusthaven held its breath.
But this was not just
Everyone
any
knew
horse.
that tomorrow
This
would
was a
bring
special
hanging.
horse.
But no one
This
knew
horse
that
was
tomorrow
named
would
Star,
also bring
and
something
Star
else.
belonged to Marcus's
Something
daughter
that would
Emma.
change everything
Emma
they
was only
believed
12
about
years
justice,
old.
about punishment,
She was sick,
and
very
about the
sick.
true cost of
The
stealing
doctor
from
said
the
she
innocent.
might not live
The
to
night
see
was
another
long
winter.
and dark and full of secrets that had not yet been revealed. The midnight hour came to Dusthaven like a ghost. The wind howled through the streets. The darkness was so complete that you could not see your own hand in front of your face. The sheriff's office was a small light in the blackness. Inside, a single oil lamp burned on the
Marcus
desk.
Henley was a
Sheriff
good man.
Wallace sat in
He
a
was
wooden
rich
chair,
because he
his
owned a
boots
big
on the
ranch.
table, his
He
gun
was
in his lap.
respected because he was
sleeping,
fair.
his head
But now he
tilted
was
back,
broken.
his mouth open.
His daughter was dying,
Outside,
and the
a
one thing that
deputy
kept
stood
her
guard by
alive
the
was
door,
gone.
But even he was
When the
struggling
sheriff
to stay
caught
awake.
Samuel Blake,
Samuel
the
Blake
town
sat
wanted
in his
justice.
chair, still
They
tied
wanted
with
it
rope.
fast and
His
hard.
one good eye was
Samuel
open.
Blake
He
had
had
been a
not slept.
drifter.
He had spent
Nobody
the entire
really knew
night
where he came
staring at
from.
the wall.
He had
waiting for
arrived in
morning,
Dusthaven about
waiting
2
for the
months
rope
ago,
around his
looking
neck.
for work.
At 1 o'clock in
Marcus
the morning,
Henley had
someone
given him
knocked
a
on the
job
door.
in the stables.
The knock was
It was
soft.
good work
It was
and good
careful.
pay.
It was the knock
But
of someone
Samuel
who
was a
did not
stealing
want to earn.
man.
The
The
deputy
crime was in
jumped
his
away.
blood.
He put his hand
He
on his
had
gun
stolen the
and
horse
opened
in
the
the
door
night.
a little bit.
He
A
had
gust of
ridden it
wind
north
came in,
toward the
blowing
desert
dust
mountains.
around like ghosts.
But his horse had
Who
gone
was
lame
there?
after
The
2
deputy
days of
asked.
hard riding.
He was a young man.
He had
maybe
been
20
forced
years
to
old,
abandon
and
Samuel's
his
own
voice
horse
shook with
and try
fear.
to ride Star.
"Let me in."
But Star
A
was not
voice
used
said
to
from the
such rough
darkness.
treatment.
"I need to talk
The
to
horse
sheriff."
was tired and
The deputy
scared.
looked out into
Samuel
the black
had
night.
ridden hard
He could see
anyway.
nothing,
He
but
had
could hear the
beaten the
voice
horse with his
clearly.
belt.
It was a man's
He had
voice.
forced her to run
It was
in the
tired
heat
and
without
sad.
rest.
"Come back in the morning," the deputy said. "The sheriff is—" "I cannot wait for morning," the voice said. "Please, let me in." There was something in those words, something that made the deputy step back and open the door wider. A man walked into the office. He was tall and thin. His clothes were covered in desert dust. His hat was torn. His face was burned dark by the sun. But his eyes were the strangest thing about him. His eyes were kind. They were sad, and they were searching for something. Sheriff Wallace woke up immediately. His hand went to his gun. "Who the hell are you?" Wallace demanded. The man did not answer right away. He looked past the sheriff. He looked at Samuel Blake. Samuel's body went very still. His good eye opened wider. For the first time since his capture, there was something in his face besides emptiness. There was fear. There was shame. There was recognition. "Hello, brother," the man said quietly. The words fell into the room like stones into water. Sheriff Wallace stood up so fast that his chair fell backward. "What did you say?" "My name is David Blake," the man said. "This man you're going to hang tomorrow is my brother." Samuel made a sound. Not quite a word, not quite a cry. It was the sound of someone whose secret was just ripped open. "I do not care if you were his mother," Sheriff Wallace said. He was angry now. He was confused. "He stole a horse. That horse belonged to a sick child. The horse died because of him. He will hang tomorrow. That is the law." David Blake nodded slowly. "I know what he did," David said. "I know about the horse. I know about the child. That is why I came." He reached into his jacket. The deputy immediately pulled his gun. "Easy," David said. He moved very slowly. He pulled out a piece of paper. It was old and yellow. The edges were torn. He handed it to the sheriff. Sheriff Wallace opened it and read. His face changed. The anger went away. Something else came into his eyes. Confusion. Pity. Maybe a little bit of shame. "What is this?" Wallace whispered. "That is the letter my brother wrote," David said. 3 years ago. He never sent it. He kept it in his pocket the whole time. I found it when he was sleeping." David sat down on a bench without being asked. He looked very tired, like he had walked a very long distance. "My brother used to be a good man," David said. "Before the war, he was kind. He loved animals. He loved people. But the war changed him. The war broke something inside him." Samuel Blake was crying now. Silent tears ran down his face. He did not try to hide them. After the war, David continued, Samuel could not work. He could not stay in one place. He could not keep any job. He kept running. He kept running from the memory of things he saw, things he did, things he could not forgive himself for. Sheriff Wallace sat back down slowly. He was still reading the letter. 2 months ago, David said, "I got a message. Samuel was in your town. He was working for a man named Henley. I was happy. I thought maybe my brother was finally stopping. I thought maybe he was healing." David's voice broke a little. "But I could not reach him in time," David said. "I came as fast as I could, but it was too late." He had already done it. Done what? Wallace asked, though he was beginning to understand. He had already stolen the horse, David said. He had already hurt the child. David looked directly at Samuel now. "What?" David asked his brother. "Why did you do it?" Samuel Blake looked at his brother for the first time. His voice was very quiet. "Because I wanted to hurt someone the way the war hurt me," Samuel said. "Because I was so full of pain that I wanted to put that pain into the world. I wanted to make someone else suffer the way I was suffering." He stopped. He took a shaking breath. "But when I saw that horse's fear," he continued, "when I heard her crying, I remembered. I remembered who I used to be. I remembered that I used to be the kind of man who helped animals, who was gentle, and I realized I was not that man anymore. The war took that man away." The room was silent except for the wind outside. Sheriff Wallace looked at the letter in his hands. Then he looked at Samuel. Then he looked at David. "What do you want me to do?" Wallace asked David. "I do not know," David said. "I do not know if my brother can be saved. I do not know if he can ever be forgiven. But I came to tell you the truth, and to ask you to believe that people can change, that people can be broken and then fixed again." Outside, the wind was getting stronger. The storm was coming closer. In the darkness, no one in the town knew what was happening in the sheriff's office. But everything was about to change. The sun rose over Dust Haven like a funeral bell. It was the day of the hanging. People had been gathering since before dawn. By 7 o'clock in the morning, almost everyone in town was standing in the square. The gallows had been built overnight. The rope hung empty, waiting. Sheriff Wallace had not slept. He sat in his office, reading David Blake's letter over and over. The words were written in a shaking hand. Samuel had written about the things he saw in the war. Dead soldiers, burning buildings, a child's face that he could never forget. And then he had written about the darkness that came after, the emptiness, the rage that had no place to go. At 8 o'clock, the judge arrived from the city. He was an old man named Harold Frost. He was known for being harsh. He believed in the law and nothing else. Not mercy, not second chances, just law. Judge Frost went directly to the sheriff's office. "Bring the prisoner," he said. "We will try him at 9 o'clock. He will hang at noon." Sheriff Wallace stood up slowly. "Judge Frost," he said, "there is something you should know about this man. But Judge Frost held up his hand. "I do not care what he is," Frost said. "I care what he did. He stole. He caused suffering to a child. The law is clear. He will hang." At 8:30, something unexpected happened. A wagon pulled into the town square. It was driven by Marcus Henley. Sitting beside him was his wife, Margaret. And in the back of the wagon, on a bed of blankets, sat Emma Henley. Emma was the sick girl, the girl who owned the horse. People gasped when they saw her. Emma had been so sick that everyone thought she was dying. But here she was, sitting up in the wagon. She was pale and thin, but her eyes were open. Her eyes were looking directly at the sheriff's office. Marcus helped his daughter down from the wagon. She could barely walk. Her legs were very weak, but she walked toward the office anyway. Her parents followed her. Sheriff Wallace opened the door. "Emma," he said gently, "you should not be here. You are too sick." But Emma did not speak. She just looked at him with those tired eyes and walked past him. Samuel Blake was sitting in his chair, still tied. He had been dressed in clean clothes. They had combed his hair. They were making him look presentable for his hanging. When Emma came in, Samuel's whole body went stiff. Emma walked straight to him. She looked down at this broken man who had stolen her horse. "Did you know me?" Emma asked. Her voice was like wind through dry grass. Very weak, very tired. Samuel could not speak. "My father told me about the horse," Emma said. "He told me what you did. He told me you beat her. He told me she died in the desert because of you." Samuel's head dropped. His shoulders shook with silent crying. "I hated you," Emma said. "I hated you so much that I could not sleep. All I could think about was hurting you the way you hurt my horse. I wanted you to suffer." The room was completely silent. "But last night," Emma continued, "my mother told me something. She told me that my father went to the desert and found Star. She found the horse's body, and she found something else." Emma reached in her pocket. She pulled out a piece of cloth. It was worn and dirty, but it had a pattern on it. It was from Samuel's jacket. "They found this caught on a rock," Emma said. "My father followed the marks." "Samuel, you did not beat the horse to death. You gave her your jacket when the sun was too hot. You tried to carry her when she was too tired. You stayed with her until the very end." Samuel looked up. His face was confused. "The horse did not die from cruelty," Emma said. "The horse died from age and sickness and the hardness of the desert. You were kind to her." The townspeople told the truth wrong. They told the truth with anger instead of with facts. Marcus Henley stepped forward. "When I found Star," Marcus said, "I knew the truth. Samuel did not kill my horse with meanness. He killed her with kindness. He tried to save her. He failed, but he tried." Judge Frost stood up. "This is not relevant," he said coldly. The law says you cannot hang a man for being kind," Emma interrupted. Even sick, even weak, her voice was suddenly strong. "The law says you cannot punish someone for trying to help. And I am the victim. I am the one whose horse died. And I say, I do not want this man to hang." The judge's face was red with anger. "You are a child," he said. "You do not understand the law." "Maybe not," Emma said. "But I understand this. Samuel took my horse because he was broken. But when he was with my horse, he was not broken anymore. He was kind. And maybe that means, maybe he can be fixed. Maybe he can be the good man again that his brother says he used to be." Judge Frost looked at Sheriff Wallace. "Cut him loose," Wallace said quietly. "The girl has spoken, and the girl is right. I will not allow this." Judge Frost shouted. The law serves justice," Wallace interrupted. "And justice is not about hanging broken men. Justice is about fixing what is broken." David Blake was standing in the corner of the room. Tears were running down his face. Samuel was staring at his brother and at the small girl who had just saved his life. At noon, the people of Dusthaven stood in the square and watched. But instead of a hanging, they watched something different. Samuel Blake walked out of the sheriff's office with his brother on one side and Emma Henley on the other. Emma could barely walk, but she would not let anyone help her except Samuel. "What happens now?" someone in the crowd asked. Sheriff Wallace stepped forward. "Now," he said, "Samuel Blake will work for Marcus Henley until the debt is paid. He will work to build a new stable. He will care for all the Henley horses with kindness. And he will learn that broken things can be put back together." Samuel knelt down in front of Emma. "I am sorry," he said. "I'm sorry I hurt you. I am sorry I took your horse." Emma put her thin hand on his head. "You are forgiven," she said simply. "Now stop being sad and start being good." And in that moment, something changed in Samuel Blake's eyes. The emptiness was gone. In its place was something new. It was not quite hope, but it was not quite nothing either. It was the beginning of becoming human again. The afternoon sun hung like a burning coin in the dusty sky above Devil's Creek. Shadows fell sharp and black across the dry ground. The wind carried the smell of dirt, sweat, and something else, the smell of fear. Sheriff Thomas rode slowly toward the old barn on the edge of town. Behind him came 20 townspeople on horseback. Ahead of them all, their eyes fixed on one man standing alone in the distance, was the reason they had all come. That man was Jacob Crane. Jacob stood near the barn's broken doors, one hand resting on the neck of a beautiful chestnut mare. The horse was thin, skeletal thin. Her ribs showed through her matted coat. Her eyes were empty, dead, like she had seen too much suffering and no longer believed in hope. Everyone in the town knew this mare. Her name was Duchess. She had belonged to old Mrs. Patterson, a widow who had raised a horse from a small foal. Duchess was famous in the territory for her speed and her gentle nature. Children loved her. The old woman had loved her more than anything. 3 months ago, Jacob Crane had stolen Duchess from Mrs. Patterson's ranch. The theft was cruel and deliberate. Everyone knew it. Mrs. Patterson had begged Crane not to take the horse. She had offered him money. She had offered him work. But Crane was a man who enjoyed hurting people, especially people who could not fight back. He had laughed at the old woman's tears and taken the mare anyway. Now, after 3 months of hard work, starvation, and beatings, Duchess was a ghost of herself. "Crane," Sheriff Thomas called out, his voice loud and clear across the empty space. "Let the horse go. Come with us peaceful, and the judge will show you mercy. Refuse, and you will hang." Jacob Crane smiled. It was a cruel, empty smile. He was not a handsome man. His face was marked with violence. Old scars, new bruises, the kind of marks that come from living a life of anger and abuse. He held a whip in his right hand. "This horse is mine," Crane shouted back. "I bought her fair and square. I have no law breaking her to my use." He was lying. Everyone knew he was lying. "There are witnesses," Sheriff Thomas said calmly. "Mrs. Patterson is in this town. She will testify that you stole this animal. The law is clear, Crane. A man who steals and abuses an animal will face justice." Crane's face turned red with rage. He raised the whip high above his head. "I'll shoot her dead before I let you have her," he screamed. "I'll shoot her right now, and there is nothing any of you can do." A horrible silence fell over the gathering. No one moved. Everyone understood that Crane meant every word. He was the kind of man who would destroy something beautiful just to prove he had power. He had done it before, many times. He destroyed things because destroying made him feel like he was somebody. Then something unexpected happened. The horse moved. Duchess lifted her thin head. Her empty eyes suddenly focused, and, in a movement that shocked everyone watching, the mare twisted her body. She bit down hard on Crane's arm. Not the arm with the whip, but his other arm. She bit with the last strength remaining in her starving body. Crane screamed. The whip fell from his hand. He tried to pull away, but Duchess held on. She had been beaten. She had been starved. She had been worked until her legs shook with every step. But somewhere deep inside her, in a place where suffering could not reach, there was still fight. There was still dignity. The townspeople watched, unable to believe what they were seeing. Duchess bit down harder. Blood ran down Crane's arm. He fell to his knees, shrieking like an animal. The pain in his arm was terrible, but worse than the pain was the shock. He had thought himself powerful. He had thought himself in control. And in one moment, the thing he had beaten and hurt and tried to break had turned and refused to be broken. Sheriff Thomas rode forward slowly. He did not rush. There was no need to rush. Crane was finished. "Let him go, girl," Thomas said softly to the mare. "You've done enough." Duchess released her bite. She stepped back, and Crane fell completely to the ground, holding his bleeding arm. The townspeople moved in. They tied Crane's hands. They took him roughly to the back of a wagon. He did not fight. He did not scream. He simply stared at the mayor with an expression of pure defeat on his face. As they carried him away, Duchess stood completely still. She was breathing heavily. Blood was on her mouth. And then, very slowly, her head turned to look at the crowd of townspeople. An old woman pushed through the crowd. It was Mrs. Patterson. She was small and bent with age, but her eyes were fierce and bright. When she saw Duchess, she began to cry. "My beautiful girl," she whispered, walking forward with her hands outstretched. "My beautiful, brave girl." Duchess nickered softly, a sound she had not made in 3 months. The sound of recognition. The sound of love returning to a place it had been hidden away. Mrs. Patterson wrapped her arms around the mayor's neck and wept into her matted coat. Sheriff Thomas stood watching this moment. He understood something that many people never learn. Justice is not always about punishing bad men. Sometimes justice is about witnessing good creatures refuse to break. Sometimes justice is about an old woman getting back the thing she loves most, and that thing proving is worthy of that love. "Get her water," Thomas said to his deputies. "Good water. And fresh hay. The very best you can find." As they worked to care for the mayor, Jacob Crane sat in chains in the back of the wagon. He would hang within a month. But before he died, he would think about this moment. He would think about the horse that refused to stay broken. He would think about the moment when the thing he tried to destroy rose up and reminded him that some spirits cannot be conquered by cruelty. And Duchess would live many more years in Mrs. Patterson's care, her ribs growing thick with health again, her eyes bright with life once more. She would never forget the pain, but she would remember something more important, that she had the strength to survive it. The execution was set for a cold morning in late November. The entire town gathered in the square to watch Jacob Crane hang. Not because they wanted to see a man die. Most people did not want that. They gathered because justice needed to be witnessed. Because when cruelty is punished, it matters that people see it happen. Crane walked to the gallows with chains on his legs. His face was gray like ash. He had aged 10 years in the 2 months since his capture. The arm that Duchess had bitten was infected for weeks. It never fully healed properly. He would have gone to his grave with scars that reminded him every day of what he had done. Sheriff Thomas stood watching, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had been a lawman for 35 years. He had seen good men die for foolish reasons. He had seen bad men die for terrible crimes. But he had never seen a creature of pure suffering show more courage than a human being. That sight had changed something inside him. As Crane's body hung motionless, the crowd stood in silence. It was not celebration. It was not revenge. It was simply the quiet acknowledgement that some people choose violence, and violence eventually chooses them back. While the town was watching the execution, Mrs. Patterson was in her barn doing something far more important. She was brushing Duchess. The old woman worked slowly and carefully, drawing the brush through the mare's coat again and again. 2 months of good food and rest and love had begun to heal the damage that Crane had done. Duchess's ribs were no longer visible. Her coat was developing a shine again. But more important than her body, her spirit was returning. The mare would often stand with her head resting on Mrs. Patterson's shoulder for hours. The trust between them had been broken, but it was being rebuilt piece by piece, moment by moment. There was no rushed healing. There was only the slow, patient work of an old woman showing a traumatized animal that the world still contained kindness. Mrs. Patterson's hands were not strong anymore. Age had made them weak, but they were gentle. The mare felt the difference between Crane's cruel whip and Patterson's loving hands. She felt it in every brush stroke. "You are home now," Mrs. Patterson whispered over and over. "You are safe now. You are loved. No one will ever hurt you again. I promise you that." Duchess closed her eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in a very long time, she believed it. The news of Crane's execution spread across the territory. It spread to neighboring towns and distant ranches. And with the news came something unexpected, a change in how people treated animals. Some folks dismissed it as coincidence. They said the timing was lucky. But Sheriff Thomas knew better. He had watched the town witness something powerful. He had watched them see that even the most broken creature could refuse to stay broken. And that sight had awakened something in people's hearts. Within 6 months, laws changed in the territory. Stricter punishments for animal cruelty, mandatory inspections of ranches, the creation of a position, an animal protection officer who would investigate claims of abuse. And the person chosen for this new position was someone surprising. It was young Billy, the deputy who had helped capture Crane. Billy had grown up rough. His father had been a cruel man who beat both animals and people. Billy had thought cruelty was simply how the world worked. But watching Duchess refuse to break had shown him something different. It had shown him that there was another way to live. "I want to help animals like her," Billy told Sheriff Thomas. "I want to make sure no creature has to suffer the way Duchess suffered." Thomas nodded. He understood. He promoted Billy and gave him the new position. And Billy took that job seriously. Over the next 20 years, he would help hundreds of animals escape abuse. He would change the way an entire region treated its creatures. All of it began with one mare refusing to be destroyed by one cruel man. Years passed. Mrs. Patterson grew older. Her hair turned completely white. Her hands became even more fragile. But she would walk to her barn every single day to spend time with Duchess. The mare grew old too. Her dark coat turned dappled with gray. Her joints became stiff. But she never forgot the kindness of the woman who had saved her. And she never forgot the terrible days with Crane. But she no longer let those memories define her. One autumn afternoon, when Mrs. Patterson was in her 84th year, she walked to the barn as she always did. Duchess was waiting for her at the gate, as she always did. The old woman and the old horse stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and red. "We made it, didn't we, girl?" Patterson whispered, stroking the mare's neck. "After everything, we both made it." Duchess nickered softly and rested her head against the old woman's chest. When Mrs. Patterson finally passed away 5 years later, the entire town came to her funeral. Sheriff Thomas gave a speech about her courage and kindness. Young Billy, now the most respected animal protection officer in the entire territory, spoke about how her devotion to Duchess had inspired him to dedicate his life to protecting animals. But the most powerful moment came when they led Duchess to the graveyard. The old mare walked slowly, her ancient body moving stiffly. When they reached Mrs. Patterson's grave, Duchess stood there for nearly an hour. She did not move. She simply stood at the spot where her beloved companion had been laid to rest. People watched in silence. No one spoke. No one rushed. They understood they were witnessing something sacred, an animal mourning, an animal remembering, an animal showing that love between a human and a creature is just as real and just as powerful as any love between two people. When Duchess finally turned away from the grave, everyone present understood something important. Duchess had loved. She had suffered. She had been broken and healed. And she had changed the entire world around her simply by refusing to stay broken. Epilogue. 30 years later, a memorial was erected in the town square of Devil's Creek. It was not a statue of Sheriff Thomas or any powerful man. It was a statue of a mare, Duchess, with a riderless saddle on her back. Beneath it were words carved in stone. "Here stands the courage of a broken creature, a horse that refused to be destroyed, a spirit that changed a town. She taught us that strength is not about power over others. Strength is about refusing to let cruelty win. Let her memory remind us always. The smallest among us can teach the greatest lessons." And every year on the anniversary of Jacob Crane's execution, people in Devil's Creek would visit that statue. They would touch the stone mare. They would remember. And they would promise themselves that they would never be the kind of person who breaks what is innocent. All because one beautiful mare refused to break.